Coming up on this Tuesday edition of Daybreak, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe restates his desire to deploy Japan's military abroad for self-defense in the wake of Islamic State's beheading of 2 Japanese nationals. Korea posts a record annual current account surplus as imports slump on sluggish domestic demand. Korea's exports also contributed less to national economic growth in 2014 than in any year since the 2008 global financial crisis. Plus, US President Barack Obama sends a $4 trillion budget proposal to Congress that seeks to raise taxes on wealthy Americans and corporations and increase domestic spending. Daybreak begins now.
Hello and thanks for joining us. To our viewers around the world, it's 6 a.m. on Tuesday, February 3rd here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broome and you're tuned in to Daybreak. Our top story this morning, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has raised the possibility of Japan's military playing a more active role in rescuing its citizens abroad in the wake of the killing of 2 Japanese men by the extremist terror group Islamic State. Speaking at a parliamentary committee on Monday, Abe said that ensuring the safety of Japanese citizens is the responsibility of the government, and he was the person who holds the most responsibility. He told the committee that he wants to discuss a framework for rescuing Japanese who are in danger in foreign lands. Now, Abe wants Japan to have the right to collective self-defense, easing pacifist laws and allowing Japan's military to fight overseas to help allies under attack. The Japanese leader wants to push through his military reforms this year. Abe reiterated his condemnation of the militants and stressed Tokyo was committed to fighting terrorism and that it needed to be able to protect its citizens. South Korea's top nuclear envoy will be in China this week for discussions on North Korea's nuclear program. Seoul's foreign ministry says Hwang Jung-guk will make a 2-day trip to Beijing from Wednesday for a meeting with his Chinese counterpart Yu Dao-wei. This follows a trilateral meeting among the nuclear envoys from South Korea, the United States and Japan in Tokyo just last week on bringing North Korea back to the 6-party talks. This multilateral dialogue involving the 2 Koreas, the United States, China, Japan and Russia has been stalled for more than 6 years. Now, North Korea says the United States recently rejected an invitation for a senior US official to visit Pyongyang for direct talks with the Kim Jong-un regime. Our Hwang Sang-hee reports.
North Korea says the United States is working hard to shift the blame for the current deadlock over dialogue. Pyongyang's state-run Korean Central News Agency reported Sunday that Washington refused its invitation to send one of its top diplomats to Pyongyang. This just days after U.S. Special Representative for North Korea Policy Sang Kim said following a meeting in Tokyo that the window to dialogue remains open as long as Pyongyang demonstrates its sincerity.
North Koreans will need to demonstrate its commitment to denuclearization in a concrete manner before we can resume any serious negotiations.
Last month, North Korea said it was willing to suspend nuclear testing if the U.S. halted its annual joint military drills with South Korea, an offer flatly rejected by Washington. Now Pyongyang could be shifting its stance. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un was quoted by state media as saying Pyongyang would no longer sit with, quote, rabid dogs openly barking about toppling its socialist system, while he personally oversaw joint naval and air force drills targeting the U.S. Navy. North Korea's blossoming friendship with Russia could be behind Pyongyang's confidence. Russia on Friday revealed plans for a large-scale military exercise with North Korea.
I think North Korea will walk the path of cooperation with Russia in order to end its international isolation. Military cooperation between North Korea and Russia in particular will have a negative effect on the Korean peninsula.
This as Kim has reportedly chosen Moscow as his first overseas destination since taking power 3 years ago. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
South Korea is calling on North Korea to take concrete measures to improve its dire human rights situation. This follows Pyongyang's rejection of a UN report that was based on accounts of North Korean defectors, which included one defector who recently confessed to making up parts of his life inside a North Korean prison camp to make it look worse. Seoul's Unification Ministry says Pyongyang's claims are pretty much ludicrous and added that the international community will continue to address the regime's human rights violations. And on a similar note, a top UN official says there's no way human rights can be protected in North Korea while the country is under the leadership of Kim Jong-un. In an interview with the Associated Press on Monday, the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in North Korea, Marzuki Darusman, said the estimated 80,000 to 100,000 prisoners will only be freed from North Korea's prison camps once Pyongyang's cult leadership system is overhauled. Darusman added the regime will only be completely dismantled when the Kim family dynasty is removed and a new leadership takes over. He noted a resolution passed by the UN General Assembly last year that calls for the North Korean leadership to be referred to the International Criminal Court for alleged crimes against humanity. The UN official said it was significant as it shows the world is ready to get tough on North Korea over its appalling human rights record. Back here in South Korea, and three-term lawmaker Yoo Seung-min has been elected as floor leader of Korea's ruling Saenuri Party. Representative Yoo defeated his pro-President Park rival Lee Ju-young in Monday's vote. The new floor leader replaces Lee Wang-gu, who was nominated as Prime Minister last month. Park Ji-won reports.
Three-term lawmaker Yoo Seung-min has been elected the ruling Saenuri Party's new floor leader with 84 votes. 149 of the party's 158 lawmakers cast their ballots on Monday at the National Assembly. In what had been a tight race, the 57-year-old lawmaker defeated four-term lawmaker and former maritime minister Lee Ju-young. Yoo's more critical of the current administration than his opponent Lee, who was considered a pro-Park Geun-hye candidate. Yoo's election comes as the president's approval rating have slipped to one of its lowest, hovering just above some 30%. Upon winning the election, Yoo emphasized the importance of direct communication with the presidential office and the government.
I vow to have sincere communication with the presidential office and the government. We will closely cooperate while pondering together which policies will truly reflect and serve the will of the people.
Four-term lawmaker Won Yu-chul will assist Yoo as the party's chief policymaker. The floor leader is in charge of spearheading ruling party legislation and coordinating party policy. But Yoo's known to disagree with major policies that the Park Geun-hye administration has pursued. For example, he has been highly critical of the Park Geun-hye administration's policy of expanding welfare without raising taxes. While he agrees with the idea of expanding social welfare services, he believes corresponding tax increases are necessary. To raise tax revenue, he says, it is necessary to re-examine corporate tax rates, which the administration has kept intact for the past 2 years. The new floor leader Yoo Seung-min and Saenuri Party leader Kim Moo-sung both stand outside the mainstream of the ruling party, meaning the administration could lose momentum on its reform drive and the public, labor, finance, and education sectors, which it vowed to push through this year. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now to the trial of the year here in Korea, and prosecutors are seeking a 3-year prison term for the former Vice President of Korean Air for her actions in the so-called nut rage incident. After a final hearing on Monday, the prosecution team said Jo Hyun-ah, the eldest daughter of the airline's chairman, should serve 3 years behind bars for violating aviation safety regulations assault on someone on a plane and coercion. They added that Jo has shown no sign of genuine remorse for her actions. The former executive continues to blame the crew for her heat-of-the-moment decision to order a senior crew member to deplane in New York in early December after they did not follow the proper procedure for serving nuts to someone in first class. This ruling is expected, the verdict is expected sometime this month, and prosecutors also alleged Jo systematically interfered with a government probe following the incident.
We start before the sun rises to bring you the latest stories out of Korea. We also lead the way with important global coverage. Stay on the pulse of what is happening with Daybreak.
Now, Korea's current account surplus hit a record high last year. You might think that's pretty good, but there is a flip side to it because tumbling imports are raising concerns that this surplus trend is actually due more to sluggish domestic demand here in Korea. Hwang Jie has the details.
Korea's current account surplus reached a new all-time high in 2014. The Bank of Korea says the amount totaled over $89 billion, making it the third straight year with a record current account surplus. It's not all good news, though, as slowing exports coupled with a drop in imports is pointing to a current account surplus trend that largely stems from sluggish domestic demand. The balance of goods last year rose to $92.8 billion as exports went up only 0.5%, while imports dropped 1.3%.
Korea's sinking imports are partly due to falling oil prices, but it's also due to the country's sluggish consumption and investment.
The pace of export growth in goods was also the slowest since the height of the global financial crisis in 2009. Exports then dropped almost 16%. The Bank of Korea expects this year's current account surplus to reach another record high of $94 billion, further raising concerns that the surplus might burden local exporters by adding upward pressure to the Korean won. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
Now, as one of the world's top 10 trading nations, Korea's economy has long relied on exports. But in 2013, the contribution of exports to the nation's economic growth actually fell to its lowest level since the 2008 global financial crisis. Our Song Ji-son reports.
Latest data from the Institute for International Trade shows that the rate exports contributed to Korea's total economic growth in 2013 was 38%, the lowest level since 2008. It indicates how much real added value exports contribute to the country's overall expansion. On average, over the past decade, the rate of contribution stood at around 72%, but the figure has been on a continuous decline for the past 4 years, performing below par since 2012 on weak overseas demand.
Economic recovery has been sluggish worldwide, and international trade volume has also dented Korea's outbound shipments, leading to a smaller contribution to the country's growth.
Despite this, exports in 2013 still boosted the creation of new jobs over the 4 million mark for the first time. However, analysts say it is important the nation diversifies its mix of export items to consumer goods and service sectors to keep job creation up amid unfavorable external factors and slowed domestic demand. Song Ji-son, Arirang News.
Korea's Samsung Electronics fell behind Apple in the fourth quarter of last year in China's smartphone market. This comes a matter of months after losing its #1 spot to low-cost Chinese manufacturer Xiaomi in the third quarter. And data from Strategy Analytics shows Korea's top tech giant was actually only slightly ahead of another Chinese competitor, Huawei. But for all of 2014, Samsung did manage to hold on to its top spot, although it's just 0.2 of a percentage point ahead of Xiaomi. Now, making an invention usually requires some scientific or technical know-how and in most cases teamwork. But for one local researcher with nearly 100 inventions under his belt now, determination and thinking outside of the box is all it took. Our Kim Min-ji reports.
It looks like a scene from Spider-Man. The device, made with the parts of 15 vacuum cleaners, enables a full-grown man to climb a wall. You might think creating something like this will require many hands with an understanding of scientific theory and technical skills. But it was made by one person on the ground floor of this very average-looking building. The space is a lab of researcher Oh Jang-geun, who has spent nearly 3 decades of his life here, working on objects ranging from the functional to the bizarre.
If I come across a new technology while reading or surfing the net, I map it out. Then I think about what it could be used for and what types of people would need it.
Oh is responsible for nearly 100 inventions, including sophisticated vehicles like hovercrafts and human-part aircrafts, and the unusual, such as this fighter robot. A person can ride it and control the arms, and anything can be fired from the pistols. Oh may be a bit eccentric, but he does have a humane side, and he is mostly concerned about people in need.
I've made customized wheelchairs for the disabled. Everyone has a different disability, so the one I made was to suit the individual.
What's more is that Oh isn't interested in commercializing his creations or making a fortune with them, and this is just something he does because he enjoys it. His latest project is a walking robot, which he says is the first step to making a wearable robot.
사람이 걸어갈 때 무릎 굽혀지는 거, 발목 굽혀지는 거.
Oh hopes that someday this smart gadget will boost the strength of those who find it hard to stand, walk, or use their legs. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Time now for a look through the global headlines we're following this Tuesday morning. For that, we turn to Eunice Kim, standing by at the news center. Good morning, Eunice.
And good morning to you, Mark. U.S. President Barack Obama has submitted a near $4 trillion spending plan for the 2016 fiscal year, reflecting many of the points he made in his State of the Union address and pitting a new uphill battle with the Republican-dominated Congress. By law, Congress will need to pass the proposed budget before the budget year begins on October 1st. The $3.99 trillion spending plan, which President Obama described as practical, not partisan, includes plans to boost public works and to rebuild old roads and bridges. It also removes current budget caps, outlines middle-class tax relief, and includes plans for a $320 billion rise in tax revenue from corporations and the wealthy. Even before the proposal was delivered, however, Republicans showed resistance. House Speaker John Boehner characterized it as a plan for more spending, more taxes, and more debt. GOP leaders are expected to submit their own budget plan later this spring. As Greek Finance Minister Yanis Varoufakis continues his charm offensive across Europe, Greek banks have recently asked for 5 billion euros in emergency liquidity assistance. That is according to an unnamed banking source cited by the AFP. The source said the request will be reviewed by the Governing Council of the European Central Bank on Wednesday as Greece stands on the brink of a liquidity crisis. Finance Minister Varoufakis in Paris on Sunday had said the new Greek government is depending on the ECB for its financial lifeline while it tries to renegotiate bailout terms. He said that Athens did not want the next loan tranche of 7.2 billion euros, saying that it needed to cut its addiction to EU bailout funds. And finally, Ebola vaccine trials began in Liberia on Monday in an effort to slow the largest spread of the hemorrhagic virus and to prevent new cases. Vaccines created by 2 separate companies were tested at a government-run hospital in the capital of Monrovia on a group of healthy adult volunteers who will receive a small compensation package. Authorities say each vaccine will hold a harmless dose of the Ebola virus and could cause side effects effects, including pain, redness, and fever. Meanwhile, a second healthcare worker from the UK was flown back home on Monday after a needle stick injury while treating a patient in Sierra Leone. Authorities said the move was a preventative one, and the worker not diagnosed with Ebola did not pose a risk to the general public.
And a good Tuesday morning to you all as we kick things off with the 2015 Asian Cup, which finished off this past weekend. Now, despite a second-place finish for Korea, the national team still proved to be a great team, as 4 of the players were named in the 2015 Asian Cup Dream Team Best 11. Now, a list of Best 11 players in the tournament, the AFC has named Son Heung-min, Ki Sung-young, Kwak Tae-hee, and the recently retired Cha Do-ri, tied for the most number of players with Australia, who also had 4 players. While Son Heung-min proved to be the go-to scorer for Korea, Ki Sung-young showed that he's a world-class playmaker, while Kwak Tae-hee and Cha Do-ri held on the defense, which only allowed 2 goals in the entire tournament. Now, one of the biggest feuds in golf was between Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson back in the days before a truce was called. Well, now Korea's Pae Sang-moon's in a pretty big feud, only his opponent isn't a golfer and it might be a fight he can't win. And after delaying his requested return to Korea by filing for administrative suit last month, the Daegu Regional Military Manpower Office has one-upped his move as they file for a bill of indictment for a breach of military service law for not returning to Korea by January 31st as requested. Meanwhile, despite all this, the 29-year-old is set to compete again this week at the PGA Farmers Insurance Open. Now, usually making a transition from one kind of competition to another is pretty tough, but for speed skater Lee Seung-hoon, he made making the transition to mass start competition look pretty easy. Now, the Korean national speed skater, who won silver in the 5,000-meter and gold in the 10,000-meter speed skating event during the 2010 Vancouver Winter Games, struggled a bit in the 2014 Sochi Winter Games and have shifted over to the mass start competition, where he finished with a final time of 7 minutes 50.52 seconds for a gold medal finish at the 5th stage of the ISU Speed Skating World Cup. Now, having competed in short track before, the similarity in mass start competition has given him an edge in the event. Now, the closest I ever got to owning a baseball team is when I play fantasy baseball every year, and when I drafted Ri Hyun-jin in the 8th round of the rookie season, people thought I was crazy. Well, he turned out to be a fantasy gem in the past few years. Now, with the LA Dodgers ranking their top fantasy players for the upcoming season, the hefty lefty was ranked 6th overall, with the team also predicting that he'll go 14-9 with an ERA of 3.21. Now, despite fantasy sports being considered a type of online game, it also shows the value of the player and how well a player is playing in the league. Now, have you ever made a decision so bad that you wish you could turn back the hands of time and redo that moment again? Well, hopefully tuning into our newscast isn't one of it, but Seattle Seahawks head coach Pete Carroll probably wishes he could after the New England Patriots came back to win Super Bowl 49. Now, down by 4 points with 20 seconds left to go, Pete Carroll calls for a pass play instead of handing it off to beast mode Marshawn Lynch at the goal line and gets it intercepted. As the Patriots win 28-24. Now, 4 touchdowns by Tom Brady leads to his 3rd Super Bowl MVP as the Patriots win their 1st championship in 10 years thanks to a questionable play call by Pete Carroll. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. I'm Lee Ji-yeon here with your latest weather updates. It's a milder morning than yesterday. The whole nation should wake up to 2 to 3 degrees higher morning lows, while the afternoon highs will hover around 5 degrees here in Seoul, similar to yesterday, and near 10 down south, rising above the seasonal averages. And we should kick off the day under lots of sunshine as well. As we can see, there are hardly any clouds hanging around the peninsula. Peninsula. But as the day goes on, more clouds will be moving into the nation. So we'll have a mild afternoon under mostly to partly sunny skies. With that in mind, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The daily low here in Seoul should kick off at -3. Then the daytime high will climb to 5, while the top temperature in Daegu and Gwangju rise to 9 and 8, and Busan should be mild, topping out at 11. And as for the other regions, Jeju Island and Daejeon should see a high of 8 and 6, and Dokdo gets up to 5. Well, that's all for Korea, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's going to do it for now. Korea Today is coming up at the top of the hour. Have a great day and stay tuned to Arirang. Goodbye.